So I've got some good news, and I've got some bad news. Let's start with the bad news first. Well, kind of bad news. Well, I'm going to go with bad news. For the purposes of the things that I care about, this is bad news. The budget in New Hampshire did pass. I wanted it to fail, but they did some last-minute negotiations. They changed some other stuff. They didn't change anything having to do with the watered-down bullshit version of the anti-CRT bill that they put in the budget, which is mostly what we're going to talk about in this video. But the budget did pass some version of the anti-CRT bill that will only affect state agencies and not really have any tangible impact on the way that CRT is taught in schools. That passed, and no one seems to care because the Republicans are too busy high-fiving and trying to make it seem like they banned CRT in schools in New Hampshire when they did not, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But that's the bad news. Like some watered-down nonsense version of the bill that was absolutely destroyed by the Republican Party from start to finish. And by the way, a whole bunch of Republicans are really pissed at me in New Hampshire because they're like, Carlin, why are you telling everyone that the Republicans destroyed the bill? Because the Republicans did destroy the bill. They did. Democrats had nothing to do with it. It was 100% sabotaged by the Republican Party in New Hampshire. They could have passed the bill outright. They chose not to, and now they're pissed that I'm not, backing them up and trying to put lipstick on the pig of the bill that they passed. So that's the bad news. The good news, though, is that apparently teachers and Democrats in New Hampshire have been lying so long about what is in the bill and haven't even bothered to read it. Like, I've read the bill. Like, I'm actually pissed about what got passed because I've actually effing read it. But they haven't. And they've been lying about this bill for months, saying it's going to ban the teaching of slavery. We aren't going to be able to teach about the sordid history of this country. We can't even teach about World War II. We can't teach about misogyny. We can't teach about any of these things. They've been lying about it so hard that I almost don't even think that it matters. Because now New Hampshire teachers and Democrats in the state are so convinced that this bill bans them from teaching everything that they haven't even bothered to read it to see that they probably still could teach exactly the things they want to teach. And they don't even know that because they haven't bothered to read the flipping bill. So, what happened with the bill? So this is a little brief summary from NHPR, which is meh. But, they actually have a section in here I just want to bring your attention to about what's in the budget. Okay, teachings on racism and sexism. Now, the freaking Epic Times yesterday reported completely incorrectly that a full version of HB 544 was included in the budget. That is completely incorrect, Epic Times. Completely false reporting. It was originally included in the budget until it got to the Senate, when the Senate absolutely destroyed it. And Epic Times didn't, of course, bother to read what was in the bill, so they don't know that, and they reported it as though the original version that was included in the budget was the actual version that made it into it. But NHPR actually tells this story a little bit more correct than the Epic Times. The budget contained language devised from an earlier so-called divisive concepts legislation, while provisions from the House were scrapped. Epic Times. Legislators have agreed on the Senate version. The Senate version sucks. The Senate version is not good. Big thumbs down to the Senate version. The Senate version is the version that was sabotaged by Chris Sununu, by Attorney General John Formella, and by State Senator Jeb Bradley. Big thumbs down to all of them. They're all rhinos that support teaching your children critical race theory in schools, and I'm going to explain how that works. One update from the House bill is that public sector employees can opt out of trainings they feel aren't following the law. Through further implications and implementation of the language remains unclear. Sununu has said he expects the Department of Education to issue guidance on the new regulations. So, what is true about this is the bill does actually do a fairly okay job of protecting state employees from having to undergo the critical race theory training, from having to undergo state-sanctioned racism in the course of their state employment. So that's good. That's all fine, well, and good. That's going to help a lot of people in the workplace to not have to go through these trainings, and that's all fair. However, that is not the end of the story. Okay, I'm going to pull up an email that I got from a super secret correspondent who I'm not going to release the name of, but that I've been emailing back and forth with over this bill. Okay. Here is the difference between what was passed in the House, which I liked the version that was passed in the House, and what made it into the final bill in the Senate. References in HB 544 to the U.S. and state of New Hampshire not being racist have been removed from the budget. That's the most important thing. That is the most important thing when it comes to schools. Listen, how critical race theory training works in the workplace is fundamentally different from how they're teaching it in schools. Almost everything that they are teaching in the schools stems from this one idea. If they can teach this one idea in schools, that is the ball game, folks. If they can teach that America was built on a foundation of racism, that it started in 1619 when the first slaves came here per the New York Times, that is the beginning and the end of the ball game. Everything else that they teach stems from that one provision. Now, State Representative Keith Ammon, who was the original sponsor of HB 544, worked to try to get an amendment included to put that language back in the bill. But the Republicans were so pissed at him for speaking out on a completely different topic that they didn't even bother. They didn't even bother. You want to know why I say the Republicans in New Hampshire destroyed this bill? Because they were so goddamn lazy that they didn't even bother to try to get the amendment passed that would put that provision back in the bill. It was right there. It was ready for them to do it, and they failed because they were playing politics, because they were pissed at the bill's sponsor for speaking out on a different issue. So, F you Republicans. I have absolutely no use for you. They're also like, Carlin, you are burning down your bridges in the Republican Party. You can never run for Congress now. So what? So what? You all threw the children in New Hampshire that are in the schools under the bus, and you did it willingly, and you did it out of spite. Do you think I want anything to do with you after you completely sabotaged this bill? Go F yourselves. All right, additional things that were removed from the bill. The following points were included in HB 544 list of prohibited activities, but have been removed from the list of prohibited activities in the budget. So these are things that were in the original bill that I liked that have since been taken out by Republicans. By Republicans. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. An individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological stress on account of his or her race or sex. Meritocracy, or traits such as hard work ethic, are racist or sexist and were created by a particular race to oppress another race. The term divisive concepts includes any other form of race or sex scapegoating, other form of race or sex scapegoating. Stereotyping or scapegoating. All of these provisions were in the original bill. All of these provisions have been taken out of the budget. No longer in the bill, are not in what's passed. Now, so what did it do? HB 544 did not discuss a course of action, but the budget does. Okay, so the budget took out all of the meat of the bill, but they gave a more clear course of action on how to file a grievance. Any person claiming to be aggrieved by a violation of this section, including the Attorney General, who is one of the key saboteurs of the bill entirely, PS, may initiate a civil action against a school or school district in Superior Court for legal or equitable relief, or with the New Hampshire Commission on Human Rights as provided, blah, blah, blah. HB 544 would have become effective in 2022. The budget becomes effective immediately, so that's, I guess, good. It would be even better if they hadn't stripped all the damn meat out of the bill in the first place. HB 544 seems focused on state agencies. The budget seems more focused on schools. No, that's completely wrong. Wrong. The only thing that that what was passed in the budget is going to protect is state agencies. That's it. Has nothing to do with colleges, has nothing to do with state contractors, has nothing to do with the schools. It is only, and I'm talking from a practical level. The way this stuff is taught in the schools is not going to effectively be impacted at all. It is really only going to impact state agencies if people know what's in the bill. But you know what the funny thing is? People aren't reading the bill. Democrats aren't reading the flipping bill. They're not reading the bill. They're just not reading it. This from John here, New Hampshire's most experienced political writer. Now, New Hampshire House Democrats notes that 10 members of the Governor's Council on Diversity and Inclusion have resigned. Letter cites Chris Sununu's signing of HB 2, which aims to censor conversations essential to advancing equity and inclusion in our state. Let's take a look at this letter. Let's take a look. Dear Governor Sununu, we are writing to inform you of our collective resignation from the Governor's Advisory Council on Diversity and Inclusion, effective immediately. On June 25th, 2021, you signed into law a provision that aims to censor conversations essential to advancing equity and inclusion in our state, specifically for those within our public education systems and all state employees. This will directly impact those who are working with some of our state's most vulnerable populations, including educators, child welfare workers, and law enforcement. This is in direct conflict with the stated purpose of the council laid out in your 2018 executive order, instructing us to identify ways to combat discrimination and advance diversity and inclusion. We accepted your appointment to this council out of commitment and love for the state and your stated desires to advance diversity and inclusion. Given your willingness to sign this damaging provision and make it law, we are no longer able to serve as your advisors. They didn't read what was in the bill. They just lied. They lied over and over and over again until they convinced themselves it was true, and then they resigned based on that lie. Here's another thing. Here's a list of New Hampshire teachers willing to go to jail for teaching CRT. Dude, this isn't even necessary. They can still teach, like, almost everything that they were teaching before based on this bill. This isn't even fucking necessary. Like, at some point, it's not like they're not going to listen to my channel. They're not going to listen to me. But at some point, one of them might actually read what was passed in the damn bill and figure this out. Let's see. New Hampshire's teacher code of conduct will now prohibit, and I'm paraphrasing, proselytizing systemic racism. Not really. And the race shaming of children. Okay, so what it's saying here is there is a provision in the bill that basically says that you can't tell people that one race is inferior to another race. Like, you can't do that. That's what that's alluding to. The systemic racism thing, not in the bill. Not in the, to the very best of my awareness, I don't think that that's true. This is unavoidable if you teach CRT to our children. Well, not really. Not really. And this is like the ignorance that is going on the right now in regards to how they're teaching CRT. And I feel like I've tried to explain this. I've actually showed you classrooms where they're teaching CRT so you can see exactly how they're teaching it. And this is, okay, side note. This is because the right has made it seem as though teaching CRT is about saying all white people suck and everyone who's not white is awesome. And that's not what it is. That's not how it shows up in the real world. I've shown you guys this repeatedly. And it's like the amount of hyperbole coming out around these trainings right now is ridiculous. Listen, it is different. The way they teach it to adults is different than the way they teach it to children. What they do in workplace trainings, like the Coke Be Less White training, what they do in workplace trainings is different than what they do in classrooms. Now, most normal people could probably suss this out because just generally speaking, the way you teach things to adults is different than the way you teach things to children. But apparently this has just flown right over the heads of everyone on the right who doesn't come to my happy hour Fridays and sees exactly how they're flipping teaching this stuff. Notice, I did not say your students or children. These children are not paying you to teach them. They don't belong to you. They belong to your parents, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, so apparently there is a list of teachers in New Hampshire that have signed onto this pledge saying, we don't care what the law says. We're going to break it anyway. We're just going to break it anyway. These people have not read the flipping bill. So here's the pledge. A recent bill introduced in the majority legislature exemplifies a rash of similar bills in Texas, Idaho, Arkansas, Iowa, Louisiana, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, West Virginia, Arizona, and North Carolina that aim to prohibit teachers from teaching the truth about this country, that it was founded on the dispossession of Native Americans, slavery, structural racism, and oppression, and structural racism is a defining characteristic of our society today. Okay. Now, let's keep this in mind. They are saying that the bills would prevent them from teaching that structural racism is a defining characteristic of our society today. Let's go back to my email from my helpful little friend here. References in HB 544 to the U.S. and state of New Hampshire not being racist have been removed from HB 2. That's not in the bill. What they're saying here isn't in the bill. Literally not in the fucking bill. We tried to get it back in the bill. The Republicans sabotaged that effort to get it back in the bill. It is literally not in the bill. This is not true. This is made up. This is fantasy. This is something that they said over and over and over and over and over again. And they said it so much that they convinced themselves it was true, even though it is not in the bill. And none of them have read the bill, and so they don't know this. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of teachers that have signed on saying, we are going to continue we are willing to break the law in order to continue to teach this. We don't mind. We will murder themselves. They're not murdering themselves at all. They're teachers who can't read what is in the bill. So that's where we stand. Now, here's what I know. I'm going to be getting some retribution next legislative session, because I may not have gotten my anti-CRT bill in this one. But what I do know is that a lot of state legislators are very interested, in New Hampshire anyway, are very interested in two ideas. They're interested in educational transparency, which would require teachers to put the materials they're teaching online, and more importantly to me, they're interested in cameras in classrooms, baby! Cameras in classrooms coming soon to the New Hampshire House of Representatives. We're gonna see what happens. I don't actually think that bill's gonna pass, but I want to see it get introduced. I think it will get introduced, and I want to see the teachers' unions have an absolute hissy fit over the fact that we're gonna try to put a camera in every public school classroom in the state, point them directly at teachers so that parents can log on to see what they're teaching. I may not have gotten my anti-CRT bill. The Republicans might be pretending they won when in fact they did not. But I'm coming back with a vengeance. You don't get rid of me that quickly. Cameras in classroom, baby. Coming in 2022. All right, guys. That's all I have. I'll link all this information below. You can go look at it yourself. See you soon.